Hello and welcome to the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, TJ Mabarty. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. And I would just first like to apologize for the technical difficulties that we were dealing with on yesterday's show. That was totally on my end. So sorry. Thanks for sticking with us here. But today is Wednesday, February 14th, as I mentioned, Valentine's Day. So today we are going to be starting off by talking some NFL offseason to come storylines. Then we are going to be talking some NBA. There was a story that came out earlier today about how there were a couple very notable teams that reached out to the Lakers about potentially trading for LeBron James amid all the cryptic stuff that he was doing last week. And then we are going to be giving some initial reactions from the trade deadline moves that did go through before ending off the show with a little Valentine's Day segment and talking about the top duos in sports, couples as you could call them. But before we get into all of that, just a reminder to like and follow wherever you may be listening or watching. And for any of our live viewers to consider using the link streaming on the bottom ticker for any tips or donations. That is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Getting into our first segment here, talking about the storylines of the NFL offseason to come. It starts with the Justin Fields and Chicago Bears draft decision conversation. NFL draft is really the next big thing. I know we're going to be getting free agency as well, and that actually comes before the draft does. But I think that this is going to be the storyline that really takes precedent on your sports TV talk shows and all of that, because it is a very nuanced conversation. I feel like a lot of people at this point have sort of bought in on the idea of trading Justin Fields and taking Caleb Williams with the number 1 overall pick. That's what I would do myself personally, and I think it is the right decision just as far as saving the money. You know, if you're having the conversation about whether or not Justin Fields is the guy and you have this golden opportunity, because number 1 overall picks really don't come around all that often. The Bears didn't even use their number 1 pick last year when they had it, and they still dropped down in the draft. They just happened to have it again because of trading that number 1 pick for this upcoming years and a little bit of mismanagement there on the Panthers end. But I think that this is just a golden opportunity to sort of reset. You know, it's obviously when you get in this position, you don't want to waste the value of it, and potentially gambling, even if it's a good gamble on Caleb Williams, might be a little scary just given the history of the quarterback position, how hard it can be to hit on some of these guys sometimes. But I think that, you know, you're still rolling with, and at this point, we sort of tried to at least talk about it yesterday on the show about Brock Purdy. There comes a point in your career where you have to stop looking at purely draft position and letting that sort of dictate what your feelings on a player may be. Justin Fields was the 4th quarterback selected in his draft class, and that doesn't mean that he can't play, and it doesn't mean that this whole conversation, I don't think he's good. I think that he very well could be a high caliber starting quarterback somewhere in the NFL. But I just feel like his time in Chicago has sort of run its course now. You can definitely blame the Chicago Bears organization for the sort of lack of support that they put around him through these first few years. But at the end of the day, because of that, he is maybe a little bit behind track, and they have to make a decision on taking a very highly touted quarterback in this draft class, or if they should roll the dice and end up paying Justin Fields, because that's kind of what you have to do. You can't hold on to him and really let him hit the open market a year from now, you would pretty much have to commit to him, I think, this year. And with all that being said, I think that over the past couple seasons, as you saw Justin Fields start to get better along the way, I thought that they did sort of start to put around some real talent around Justin Fields. The trade for DJ Moore, and it hasn't been perfect because they traded a very prime, the first pick of the second round last year for a Chase Claypool that didn't work out there in Chicago. So it wasn't totally for a lack of effort, but it was a lack of execution, really. And you can come into this upcoming season sort of with a fresh slate as long as Caleb Williams is on board. He hasn't openly said anything to show that he wouldn't be on board. I know there's been a little bit of buzz, but I don't think that until we hear anything from the Williams family themselves, I think that they just sort of have to go ahead and, make Caleb Williams say that he doesn't want to come play for you before you just sort of sell off the pick for nothing. So that is my opinion. I've sort of given it in the past, but it becomes that much more interesting too with the Justin Fields conversation, the amount of teams that could potentially be interested, because NFL Network's Daniel Jeremiah just put out a report the other day talking about how up to 5 teams could be looking to trade up for a quarterback in the draft this year. If there are that many openings, then I think that also sort of adds to some of these other teams that could potentially trade for a Justin Fields. Now, not quite the same. I'm curious what sort of pricing Justin Fields would go for. I don't think it would be a first round pick. If the Bears are moving on for another quarterback, there is definitely still leverage there for the Bears. They don't have to move off from him. They can do whatever they want. They can ultimately decide that they do want Justin Fields and trade off that pick for a ransom. But I think that in the all likelihood, it could be a day 2 pick and maybe some extra stuff there with it. But a handful of teams could potentially be looking to either trade up with the Bears, trade up in the draft period, and maybe that means a Justin Fields trade somewhere along the way there. I think that's sort of tying into that. There is a very interesting decision that starts coming this Friday with one of these teams that could potentially be looking for a quarterback, and that is the Seattle Seahawks. They have hired a whole new staff, really, as far as their coaching staff. They bring in Mike Macdonald as their head coach. They have a new offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, the whole thing. Their general manager, John Schneider, was actually working alongside Pete Carroll. They were sort of in charge of a lot of these football decisions, and now that Pete Carroll is out the door, it really just falls on him more so now. And Carroll, I'm sure, had no interest in really going through much of a rebuilding process, but maybe there's a chance that they don't see the need to keep Geno Smith on the staff, because Geno's been a very fun story. He's been very solid for the Seahawks the past couple years, but they gave him a contract last offseason that purposefully had outs after this season and next. They have to make a decision by Friday if they hold on to him. If they don't cut him by Friday, he will be owed a guaranteed $12.7 million. They can get off of that money if they release him by then. He is set to make up to $22.5 million this year. And again, I think everybody is in on Geno Smith. The Iant wrote back, it was a great story, but for this Seahawks team that we really don't see a real high level of contention, I think that was sort of displayed last year. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up moving ways here. Like I mentioned, new head coach in McDonald, new offensive coordinator in Ryan Grubb. McDonald had an interesting interview the other day where he was really praising Grubb for his time he spent with Washington College, that is, and talking about the offensive line and the run game, and McDonald, more of a defensive guy, it seems like probably wants to sort of focus on the run game more so, while there is this even if you have Geno Smith, you know that he can't be your true identity, I don't think, of a football team. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they go forward with this, because McDonald has been non-committal towards Geno through his first few press conferences, and John Schneider has talked about how, yes, he thought Geno finished the season strong, and he's very appreciative of everything Geno's given them, but also wasn't really committal. And he's reportedly been very high on Drew Lock ever since they traded for him from the Broncos. Very small sample size, obviously, there, but he did at least shine in the moment, the primetime game against the Eagles when he came in and drove the game-winning touchdown. So very interesting to see how this all plays out there. They gave McDonald a 6-year deal, which means that typically means, at least, that the front office is a little more willing to take its time with the process. And again, I feel like giving $22.5 million to a Geno Smith is not really quite a rebuilding move, especially for a team here that is currently in the red as far as cap space going into next year. They can actually, interestingly enough, if they were to trade for Justin Fields, save themselves $13 million just on the 2024 cap salary table alone. But again, really interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, as a Patriots fan, I wouldn't be mad at signing Geno Smith, at least for the meantime. But we'll have some more updates on that as the week comes. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily fully committed to Geno if they don't cut him by Friday, but it would be, if they had solid plans to move off from him, this would be the easiest out for them. We talked about it the other week as well. The Cowboys are reportedly all in, is what Jerry Jones told reporters at the Senior Bowl this year. What that exactly means as far as their offseason moves, I'm not 100% sure yet. They did just hire Mike Zimmer as their defensive coordinator after a little bit of back and forth between whether or not they were going to go with him, who was the initial early candidate, and then the Jones family was also very intrigued with Rex Ryan's as well. So there was a little bit of back and forth there. The Jones family and Rex Ryan's didn't really see eye to eye in terms of the length of the contract. So that falls through. They end up hiring Zimmer. So they have the majority of their staff in place. And I think that Zimmer is a solid hire. It's just a matter of, what are you going to do roster-wise to sort of put this together? I think that they've been a little lackluster as well with linebackers over the past couple seasons. Leighton Vander Esch is a solid linebacker, but really not too much else there. I believe he's been dealing with some sporadic injuries at least, but going to be very interesting to just monitor what that all-in means. And I think that Stephon Diggs is another name that we sort of talked about when we talked about the aftermath of the Bills losing that playoff game against the Chiefs a few weeks ago, where, Diggs has been obviously an insanely talented athlete since he stepped foot in the NFL, going back to his time with the Vikings, but there was a little bit of drama that went on there, and then he ends up getting traded to the Bills. It seems like a great fit. He sort of also helped Josh Allen to mature and unlock him a little bit, but coming into the year, there was a whole lot of drama going on there. Trayvon Diggs was tweeting about, well, Josh Allen didn't start being good until Stephon got there, which, yes, that is true. Is Stephon the reason that Josh Allen got good? I don't know about that. But when you look at Diggs's contract for the upcoming years, he is about to jump from a $1 million cap hit from this past year to 18.5 next season. He'll be 18 million, 19 million, 14.5 million into his 30s by the time that his contract is up. At that point, he will be playing in his age 34 season. So, that is a lot of money, obviously, to be giving to a receiver that's a little bit of a headache as well. Obviously, so much talent there, but he hasn't really been there in the big moments for the Bills in these past few seasons. Now, you can blame him, you can blame Josh Allen, you can blame the offensive coordinator situation. Obviously, it hasn't been great as they made a midseason fire this year, but just a very interesting conversation, I think, to have going forward. And for as far as Diggs and Allen, and a Bills team that I believe they are in the red for contract space going forward into next season. I don't think that it is a great situation for them, and if that's the case, they are going to have to cut some costs. Yeah, they are bottom 4 in the league in terms of projected salary cap space for next season. So going to have to sort of reshape their roster in some way, and also, sort of retool their roster as far as going forward. You're going to be paying Josh Allen the max contract. In which areas are you going to cut back? I do think that Stephon Diggs probably very much helped Allen develop over these past few seasons, but at a certain point, I think that we now sort of trust Josh Allen as the quarterback that he is. So you probably can cut ties with a guy like Stephon Diggs. Obviously not the same exact situation, especially given the Travis Kelce factor of it, but Tyreek Hill definitely helped Mahomes early on in his career, and then Mahomes sort of developed to a point where he didn't need a safety blanket receiver like that. And I know that Travis Kelce is a bit of a safety blanket as well, but Khalil Shakir for the Bills really started developing over the second half of the season. I love Dalton Kincaid, the tight end out of Utah, and I really liked when they were incorporating him into the offense more. I've always liked Dawson Knox. I'm not sure what his contract situation is, but you could potentially have a little bit of a two-headed monster at tight end. You have Gabe Davis as well, who also may be seeing his way out a little bit of a rough ending to the season in terms of his relationship with the Bills. But I don't know. The Bills as a whole are going to be a very interesting team. A bad start to the year, but by the end of it, it seemed like this was the opportunity for them to sort of take that leap and compete with the Chiefs, knock them off, and instead they fall flat. So we will see with all of that. Those are sort of the main storylines that stick out to me. I'm sure as we start rolling with all the different news, we will be getting it to you on the show. But for now, we are going to be taking our first break. When we come back on the other side, we will be talking about the potential almost trades that went down for LeBron James in the NBA last week. So stick with us. We will be right back.